Where should you be advertising, Google or Facebook? Now this comes down to two things, demand capture versus demand generation. And these are two concepts I want to talk about in today's video because some people who are running a business, they just don't have the fundamental understanding of like, hey, where should I be running my ad? Should I run it on Google? Should I run it on Facebook? And listen, like in the ideal world, of course, you should be running it on both, but we also understand that that requires a bit of a budget to do that. And of course, some expertise to make sure that they're running correctly as well. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the concept demand capture and demand generate. So we can also take a look at some of the examples, how it's set up, how it works. So you, the viewer, can also just decide where you should be running your ad campaign the best. And not just because you saw some video or saw somebody talk about Facebook might be better than Google or Google might be better than Facebook, and then you start running. No, like you need to run it on data and what actually works for your particular type of business. So without further ado, we can pretty much get into it. So what is demand capture and what is demand generate in the first place? So demand capture, to put it in simple terms, it's a service you need at this very moment. Now, the example I have over here is an electrician. So power goes out and somebody calls electrician near me. You click a Google ad and call. That is demand capture maximization. What you're doing over there, because you're not going to wait for a Facebook ad. So let's say like all the lights went out or something happened, or like if water starts leaking. You're not going to wait for like a plumber ad or an electricity ad to kind of like pop up on Facebook or TikTok while you're scrolling, and then you contact them like, oh wow, it's been 24 hours, but I got this ad. Let's get this problem fixed. Now you're going to do that as soon as the problem occurs. You're going to go to Google and you're going to fill that need as soon as humanly possible. So that is you capturing a demand. So over here in those scenarios, placement matters the most. So for example, if you aren't appearing on the demand capture platforms, then you're already kind of like losing half the battle. So of course, if you want the online platforms to work for a demand capture type of business, this is where you need to make sure that you're appearing on all of the places where people search when it comes to capturing a demand. In other words, it's pretty much like you show up when someone is already looking to buy. And demand generation is basically like creating intent before they search. So you educate them, build trust, and warm people up until they're ready. And generating demand, of course, has a very massive target audience market. Like you can, of course, generate demand for pretty much anything you want. Now, of course, it is a little more complex as well, but this is where also most of the dollars are made. Like if you can maximize demand generated, and if you can instantly generate demand for your product, because most of the stuff is already something people know that they want, then they might come across your ad, and then the timing might hit as well, and then they might buy your product or service at that point anyway. So the example I have over here is slow mold issue. They keep seeing your Facebook ad or video about signs of mold, and a week later they book an inspection. So we might be talking about, just like slow molding issues. Like, hey, if you see these things, if you are noticing these type of patterns, you might have a mold issue. Book for your free mold inspection. So that is you generating a demand, because mold is one of those things where unless the roof is falling over, then of course you might have to call somebody pretty much right away. I don't know what you're doing, but mold is one of those things where it slowly kind of like builds up. And then as soon as you start noticing it, some people might not do anything about it pretty much as soon as they saw like one or two spots or something that's creeping up slowly. As soon as you see videos, as soon as you see content of, just mold on how it looks like, what it can do, then that might prompt them to book a call at the very least, or like get the inspection done. So that is how you're generating demand for that specific side of things as well. Now I know I'm giving more of the home service type business examples. This isn't necessarily limited to just home service businesses. It just applies very well to the demand capture side of things, Google. Because things like plumbing, HVAC stuff, pest control, these are mainly demand capture services. Of course, what we do is more on the demand generate side of things, because you can, of course, have a lot of fun and build this out a lot more and make more cash with the demand generate as well. But demand capture, depending on the business, is also very important. So if you're a demand capture business, let's say if you're pest control and somebody has a pest control issue right now, and then you're advertising on Facebook, then you might be wasting your ad spend theoretically. And also over here, I have some examples on how these three people can do both, like capture and generate, because there are certain cases where you can do both capture and generate, but there are some cases where like generate might not be able to do as well as capture. Of course, there will be always a sub-market in both, but I would always go for the masses when it comes to one. So if you can maximize on the capture side of things, always go on the capture side of things. So over here for a plumber, how you capture a person is by appearing on the search burst pipe repair. So for example, if anybody has a pipe burst and then you're within the vicinity of the area and they typed up, and then your name pops up, then of course you're capturing that demand. And how this person can generate demand for his services, which is going to be another part of the service, not necessarily like, if you have a burst pipe, call me, like not that word. It's going to be pretty much kind of like creating content or creating videos such as tankless versus tank explainer, water quality, education, and also financing. So if anybody wants kind of like a new tank or wants to implement one of the plumbing systems, that's something you can generate demand for and have that installed, because somebody might be over the edge, or somebody might need like a water system. They've been over the edge, or they've been thinking, or maybe just they just don't have enough information. You can generate demand using that product and show it to all of those people. And you'll be surprised on how many leads you can generate just by having an ad like this. Same with HVAC. On the capture side of things, it's going to be AC repair today. And how you can generate is by just talking about tune-ups, system replacement education, and also IRA/rebate messaging. So that's HVAC. Pest control, pretty simple. If somebody has a roach issue, you can pretty much come up when they search a roach exterminator now, or like pest control in the area, whatever that is. You just want to make sure within that vicinity you're showing up first. And then of course, how they can generate demand is like just seasonal prevention tips. So if you haven't had a pest control come by your place within months, just have them come by and at least look at the place. That's something you can generate demand for, just like a routine checkup maybe. So yeah, prevention tips, and also kind of like quarterly plan benefits. Like, yeah, we'll come every quarter to make sure everything is fine, there's no pest. And I'm pretty sure a lot of buildings, residents, real estate people kind of like use these services just so they can make sure they're protecting the property, so no ants or insects are pretty much in their business. So that's how you can generate demand for that specific archetype of business as well. So it's a very important concept to know. So over here we have like 4 demand capture only, like practically. So emergency locksmith, locked out, needs help now. There's very little examples I can think of when it comes to like emergency locksmith. Basically, like if you're locked out of your car, you're not going to wait for Facebook. You just need that service now. Towing/roadside assistance. So like flat tire, dead battery, you need that service now. Water damage restorations, burst pipe, flood at 2 a.m. You need that service now. Emergency dental/urgent care, severe toothache, injury, you need those services now. Now 3 and 4, of course, especially 4 when it comes to urgent care, dental care, these are something, of course, you can advertise in a different way. So for example, dentists could do like veneers, $400 off or something like that for demand generate for people who are looking for that specific side of things. But these are examples for demand capture only. In what scenarios should you be appearing for demand capture stuff? Demand generation only. So high ticket coaching programs, leadership, weight loss, business, educate with proof, and storage to book calls. So high ticket coaching programs, of course, these are one of those things where you can only generate demand, and which is practical to do. Because if you have a service, let's say if you're selling like web design or like web development services for a specific niche of business, and then you perhaps create an ad calling out these people and telling them the benefits of what your services can do for them, you're basically generating demand for your specific product. Because there's a high chance when it comes to demand generation that the prospect isn't educated enough to make a demand capture search about your specific product or service, if that makes sense. So if a person doesn't have awareness of what content can do for them or of what a good website can do for them, they're not going to be looking that up. You need to be educating them. And this is where content comes in place as well, alongside demand generation ads. So very, very important to know. And then of course we have 2 more examples. I'll talk about the last one, luxury trips and retreats. So nobody in an ideal scenario, like really in an emergency basis, need like a luxury trip/retreat. Now, some of you might be watching this, but like, Ariba, I actually do need a vacation, which is fair enough, but you might come across an ad of, I don't know, like Expedia or some other travel agency, or even like a travel advisor who kind of like, just brings you this amazing deal on the demand generation basis. Like book a trip to Bali for $1,500, all inclusive. And then you're like, yes, I want this. And then they inspire you with like videos and testimonials, and they keep nurturing you until you actually inquire, because you've been looking at it, you've been thinking about it. And then as soon as the time is right, you are going to apply. And then this kind of like builds up as well, because every single day, there are people who have been nurtured who are applying. And then the people again, the next day, who have been nurturing from the past 2 months will be applying. So demand generation is an extremely powerful tool when it comes to just creating consistent demand for your products or services. Now, lastly, what I'll talk about is kind of like how the ad setup look like. This is a very simple diagram I made, but of course this goes a little more in depth. So for example, let's say if it's an audience and if it's an immediate need, if your services are pretty much like immediate need and it has yes to it. But there are some services, and I want to make this super clear, who do need both, like demand capture and demand generate. In your case, this might be a little different, but for most of you watching, you have to identify, like, is your business an immediate need? If it's a yes, then I would try looking at a Google search ads. Like maybe you do redirect them to a landing page, or just have like a call button like this dude over here. You can just call this person directly and then just get the conversion right off the bat. So it's pretty simple. Now, this is me just giving you like a simple setup. You don't have to pretty much follow this word for word. As long as you've identified that it is a demand capture business, of course, you can do a lot of your homework and just kind of like see what the best strategies are to implement demand capture. But let's say if it's not an immediate need, you go to meta prospecting, which is basically you're running an ad on Facebook and then you're finding people who are interested within your services because, like you ran the ad, you ran the funnel, you've had the technical part set up correctly, now Facebook is doing is like finding people on your behalf. That's how these platforms work. And this company is owned by people I know, so I have a very good understanding of how their setup works as well. This is also a perfect example I was able to think of when it comes to demand generation. Is like a cold email automation system. Some people might not even know what that is. So they see this ad and they look at the result that this can actually apply. Close your next 20 clients with a cold email system. And they think of this, they're like, okay, yeah, I want 20 clients. I don't know what this cold email automation system is. Let me take a look at it. Or some people who do know it might not be warm enough to the fact that they want to actually implement it. I might just look into it because maybe perhaps the offer is pretty compelling, or how they present themselves into the actual landing page seems extremely promising. So that's how you have like all these different avenues of demand generation people who are consistently clicking on this learn more button and giving these people business. So it's an extremely powerful tool to have when it comes to generating demand for your products or services. Now over here, this is just the technical part. So for example, Meta finds people for you. What you need to do is qualify these people. So like ideally use a landing page for that, or at the very least, just use conditional logics within the instant form side of things, which is something I talked about in yesterday's video on what kind of ads you need to be running and how you need to be actually qualifying the leads as well when it comes to the demand generate side of things, which was my previous video. You can go ahead and watch that as well if you're already running ads and generating, just bad leads. That video is pretty much going to help you fix that right off the bat. So over here, this is just the technical part. Over here, we need to qualify them, lead form with DQ, qualify the lead, and just get the conversion. And then of course, if you have the funnel, if you already know what you want to optimize for, if you want book calls, you can just do like a schedule or like a website schedule or book call. And then we have the conversion, which is a qualified lead, book call, or a purchase as the demand generate, kind of like doing its job already. So that is pretty much the premise of this video, is just identifying demand capture versus demand generation and what type of ads you need to be running to maximize the demand capture side of things and also the demand generation side of things. Hopefully the examples in this video was helpful as well, because the last thing I want people to do is just like spending dollars on a source that doesn't work for them. So also in my previous video where I talked about, let's say you're spending dollars on the right source as well, but you're just doing it incorrectly because there's this whole technical setup that needs to take place in order for you to generate qualified leads. So that needs to happen as well. But yeah, if you do have any questions, just feel free to comment down below and I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. And if you do need implementing, ads, organic, and just want to have an established online platform, there's a Calendly link in the description, which you can click, and then we can perhaps get on a call, kind of like see how we can be a good fit for your business. And then from there, just get to work. Other than that, if you did enjoy this video, please make sure to subscribe and also like this video as well, because it helps push this video out to other business owners such as yourself. And I want to make sure this information gets distributed to them as fast as possible as well, so they can make correct decisions based on advertising.